Yeah, I've been stunned by the shift in both rhetoric, thought, and action in the United States from being favorably disposed towards China to now treating China as openly talking about China as an enemy. I cannot give you an explanation why in terms from the standpoint of the United States. It's not like China. It'd be one thing if you did to us what the Japanese did in 1941, if you attacked and blew up Pearl Harbor. It is, I've always amused now that one of the issues is we can't let these Chinese come into America and buy up our farmland. But yet we want Americans to be able to go into places like China and buy up property there. That's okay. So it's the double standard that I see unfolding. But from your perspective, any understanding of why there's been this shift? What's driving this shift in the U.S. attitude?
You ask a very important questions. That's also the questions confuse China research and normal Chinese peoples very, very deeply in the last I think it's since the year 2017 or 2018. Just like suddenly in one night, we just shift. Completely different. From China's side, actually, in Trump administrations, we develop explanations. We believe a lot of scholars and research believe such kind of change is an incident, which means because Trump is so different, he is abnormal. So when he was removed from the White House, everything will change back. We will say that the Sino-US relationship, we wish it will go back to its normal track. When we talking about this, it's like we have imaginations that China and the US, their relationship have a kind of normal track. But with the astonish or attack of the stupid policies of Trump's administrations, we just leave that track. When Trump leave this office, and then our car will go back to that track. But actually, it don't happen. Biden just continue lots of these policies. And I think what stimulates China most is the rhetoric changes. It's more and more clearly that the United States use those very weird ideological terms to describe China, like name China like communist China, talking about the so-called communist parties. It's just to create a new image of China, just like suddenly United States find that China is red. But actually, this CPC is founding these countries in 1949, and we already developed on our diplomatic relationships for more than 40 years, since the late of the 1970s. And we cannot understand why. We try to finding out some optional explanations. Maybe the United States, their governments, those political elites, they develop some rhetoric framework, try to explain to the normal US peoples why they face some problems. And this problems is produced by China, not by United States. And then by such kind of framework, they need to create an enemy. They need to transfer China from a kind of friendly, cooperated partners into a horrified, terrible enemies in the general ways. That confused Chinese peoples a lot. Just you mentioned, from China's side, we feel very, very weird. We did not doing those enemy-like behaviors or policies toward the United States. In quite a long time, during China's open up and reform process, we believe that the United States, as a good tutor, as a good teachers, we need to learn from the United States. I think you must remember Mr. Yang Jiechi when he and Wang Yi met Sullivan and Blinken in Alaska when Biden took his office. During that negotiations, Yang Jiechi said that in Chinese, he said that 我们把你想得太好了. They say that we take too much good considerations from your side. We always take a good perceptions of your behaviors, and we tolerate you too much. We have too much expectation from your side. It's very highly symbolic moment of Sino-US relationships. From then on, China took a much more practical attitude to rebuild our perceptions toward the United States. And nowadays, China tried to take practical ways, which means we are focusing more on interest. And of course, we still have some considerations. We wish we can manage our conflict and dispute between us. And we can manage some middle or low level cooperations when necessary. And generally speaking, China we don't have this interest to have a different direct conflict and a confrontation with the United States. And we still wish, try to providing some good signals which prove that good willness. We're still looking for the potential and the possible cooperations from the United States. But frankly speaking, we got more and more disappointed. We did not got positive feedback from US side.
Right. I think I'm quite a bit older than you because I remember 1972. So I was just coming out of high school. And that's when Nixon goes to China and opens up the relationship with China, and ultimately culminates with the United States recognizing the one China policy. Now, why did we do that? Well, the manipulations of Kissinger and Nixon, and then it was maintained by their successors, was to make sure that China and Russia never got together. That we kept you two apart. Even though you're neighbors, we don't want you to be friends, which is a very sort of cynical policy approach from the standpoint of the United States. And yet, in tandem with that, it then opened up this, the investment that was flowing into China, and the number of U.S. companies that started building both factories and establishing businesses. And yet, throughout this, the way I've seen the rhetoric, the public commentary shift, particularly over the last 6 years, and I think it started before Trump, is China is being described as an imperial power. And the point I always bring up, I'm going, give me the list of countries that China's invaded. Give me the list of those countries where China has launched military attacks without any necessary provocation over the last 30 years, 40 years. And yet, here's the United States with, you need a big sheet of paper and lots of room to write out the country. You go, okay, yeah, it's Iraq twice, Syria, Afghanistan, Panama, Grenada, Libya, and it goes down the list. Do the Chinese view the United States as a threat to international order, given our record?
And I think that as a research on international relations, I can understand why some people inside the United States would prefer to name China as an imperialism or an imperialist countries or empire. Because according to the so-called international relations, the realism relations, Hans Morgenthau, in his very famous book, The War and Politics Among Great Powers, he defined that there are two different countries. One country named the status quo powers. These status quo powers, they prefer to keep these orders. And the other countries, he named it revisionist or imperialism or imperialist state, which means these countries, the development of these countries will changing the orders. So according to this theory, you will find that all developing countries in today's world, they are imperialist state because they all want to change the orders produced and created by the Western countries. From China's side, yes, we have different understandings or different images of the United States. In quite a long time, frankly speaking, especially after the beginning of open up and reform policies, we tried to take a more practical attitude toward the United States. First, we did not agree all US policies. We name US policy, especially those action and behaviors to invade other countries in the name of we blame the United States in the name of hegemony. Hegemony is a negative term in Chinese cultural background. Second, in quite a long time, we try to keep a balance to deal with our relationship with the United States. Sometimes we even accept the asymmetric positions between our bilateral relations, which means in lots of times China make a compromise to ensure that Sino and US relationships can ensure in a quite stable and peaceful tracks. And third, according to Chinese understanding, we believe these bilateral relationships, especially US-China relationships in the period of first 10 years of the end of Cold War, should be developed in such kind of ways that United States and China develop their bilateral relationships mainly based on the guiding principles of so-called comparative advantages, in which means where United States enjoyed advantages on the capital and innovations, and China enjoyed advantages, comparative advantages on the industry, the labor forces, the human resources, then United States and China can launch lots of effective cooperations, very widely spread from the trade, investment, technical innovations, and even in the lots of fields of global, so-called global governance. Such kind of cooperations may be that equal. Maybe United States enjoy more advantages, but China and maybe the world can get benefits from such kind of bilateral relationships. So from China's side, we feel a little bit confused, sometimes frustrated. It seems that just in one night, United States suddenly changed all its policy and strategies to China. So to China's side, we believe we already sending our goodwillness by using a very benign rhetoric to describe United States behavior and policy and strategies in the world since we improve our relationship in early of 1970s. Nowadays, China still try to avoid use those very traditional Cold War style the rhetoric to describe United States or to simply define United States as kind of threat to the world. We try to focus on detailed policies and the detailed strategies so that the main purpose is we want to take a quite responsible attitude to dealing with these bilateral relationships, which we believe is the most important bilateral relationships towards stability, peace, and development, not in today, but in the foreseeable future.